Hello and welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Tonight, we invite you to dim the lights, get comfortable, and settle into the quiet rhythm of the past. A time long gone, a world far removed from our own, where daily life followed the toll of a bell rather than the buzz of a screen. Our journey this evening begins behind high stone walls, cloistered away from the noise of the medieval world. It was a life believed to be holy, serene, and elevated, but the truth was often far less romantic. This is the story of the medieval nun, of cold stone floors beneath bare feet, of whispered prayers, endless repetition, and a silence so thick it could press upon your chest. It is the story of duty, of resignation, and of a kind of existence where personal choice was often a luxury you could not afford. Over the next 2 hours, we will explore 4 chapters of history. We begin with a slow descent into the daily life of a medieval nun, her rigid schedule, her unheated cell, the aching monotony of sacred routine. Then, we'll shift to the curious life of Hildegard von Bingen, visionary nun, whose mystical experiences lifted her beyond the silence of her sisters. From there, we'll unravel the mystery of the Gospel of Judessa, controversial text lost for centuries, the strange political tensions it reveals about early Christianity. And finally, we'll peek through carved wooden doors into the richly adorned chambers of powerful abbots, holy men whose lives bore little resemblance to the humility they preached. So, close your eyes if you wish. Let the steady current of the past carry you gently. And if sleep should take you along the way, let it come without resistance. Let's begin. Imagine yourself waking to the chill of dawn before the sun has even touched the horizon. The air is still, and the silence around you is complete save for the soft shuffle of feet and the occasional creak of wooden boards. Your cell is small, barely more than a stone closet. There is a narrow cot, a wooden cross, and perhaps, if you're fortunate, a worn woolen blanket that does little to keep the cold at bay. The bell rings. It always rings. Matins, the first of many prayers. It is still dark, your breath visible in the frigid air, as you gather with your sisters in the chapel. The cold stone bites through your habit as you kneel. You do not speak. Speaking is reserved for prayer, and even then, only in solemn, measured Latin. Your day will not truly begin until hours later. But already, you are on the clock of devotion. The rhythm of your life is sacred and suffocating. 7 or more canonical hours of prayer divide your day. Between them, labor. You tend the gardens, copy manuscripts, scrub floors, mend robes, and prepare meals in silence. Always in silence. Speech is discouraged unless necessary. Some orders impose complete silence, with only hand signals and the occasional whispered exception. Imagine trying to ask for thread or confess pain, or explain an illness with only a flick of your fingers or the raise of your brow. Meals are sparse and simple. A thin pottage, stale bread. On feast days, perhaps some fish or cheese. You sit on wooden benches while a sister reads aloud from Scripture or the lives of saints. And if you are ill, you pray. If you are unhappy, you pray. If you long for something else, you bury it. Entering a convent wasn't always a personal decision. Many young women, some as young as 12, were offered to the church by their families, in exchange for dowries they could not afford or political alliances they wished to forge. For some, it was a form of protection. For others, a prison. Discipline is strict. Punishments range from extra chores to solitary confinement. Some were made to lie prostrate in the chapel, face down on the cold flagstones for hours, while others chanted psalms above them. There is no concept of personal time, no escape. You sleep when the bell tells you. You rise when the bell tells you. Your thoughts are your own, but even those you are told must be policed for sin. You are married to God, they say. But it often feels like being married to silence itself. The seasons pass slowly. Winter brings cold that seeps into your bones.
Summer brings labor beneath a punishing sun. Spring is planting, autumn is harvest, and always the cycle of prayer continues. Still, there are moments of quiet beauty. The sound of bird song during lauds, as the morning light filters through a narrow stained glass window. The warm scent of beeswax during a candlelit vigil. The soft scratch of a quill on vellum as you copy the words of saints long dead. And sometimes, in those small moments, you may find peace. A flicker of purpose, but the truth remains. This is a life of surrender, of repetition, of small sacrifices and smaller joys. And if you begin to question your role, your calling, your confinement, you must bury that doubt deep, deeper still. Because the walls of the convent do not bend, they echo, and they keep secrets very well. Now, let us quietly shift our focus from the silent masses of unnamed sisters to one who refused to remain silent. Now, let us step away from the cold monotony of convent corridors and turn toward the extraordinary. It is the year 1098, and in the green, rolling Rhineland of what is now Western Germany, a child is born. She is the 10th child of a noble family, an unremarkable birth order, yet one with sacred consequence. 10th children were sometimes seen as tithe offerings to the church, and so, even as a young girl, Hildegard of Bingen is promised to God at 8 years old. She is enclosed, not simply accepted into the Benedictine monastery at Disse-Bodenberg. Unlike most, her enclosure is literal. She is walled into a small anchorage with another woman, Jutta, a noblewoman turned recluse. There is no door, only a small window through which food and messages pass. Here, behind stone, she begins her journey inward. The life of a medieval mystic was not a romantic one. Silence, fasting, prayer, and penance formed the structure of her early years. And yet from childhood, Hildegard sees things others do not. She experiences visions, intensely vivid, radiant floods of images and voices that speak to her in the language of angels. At first, she keeps them secret. In an age when prophecy could so easily be condemned as heresy or as madness, secrecy was safer than confession. By her early 40s, the visions become too powerful to ignore. She writes slowly, deliberately, in careful Latin. She does not claim authorship, but rather describes herself as the feather on the breath of God. She is not creating. She is transcribing what she sees and hears. And what she sees is extraordinary. Her first major work, Sivius Short for Know, The Ways of the Lord, is a vast, structured account of 26 visions, dazzling geometric images of divine order, apocalyptic warnings, and poetic theology. These are not quiet reflections. They're luminous, architectural dreamscapes, spheres of light, ladders of fire, radiant wheels, cosmic trees. They combine scripture with science, mysticism with morality. Hildegard's writings gain attention, at first cautiously, then reverently. She is examined by church officials. Rather than condemning her, they validate her visions. She is invited to speak, to advise, to write more. This is unusual. Women in the 12th century were not encouraged to teach, let alone preach. But Hildegard is no ordinary nun. She becomes an abbess, founding not one but 2 convents. She oversees the construction of Rupertsberg, a monastic house designed according to her visions. It stands as a beacon of discipline and creativities, walls echoing not only with prayers, but with music. Ah, yes, her music. Hildegard composes hymns unlike anything else in the monastic world. Her collection, Symphonia, Harmony, Celestium, Revelation, Mevelation, Symphonies of the Celestial Revelations, contains soaring melodies and rich, poetic Latin. She breaks away from traditional chant structures, embracing dramatic intervals and ethereal tones. Her compositions are otherworldly designed, she says, to reflect the voices she hears from heaven. Even today, when performed, they seem to suspend time. But Hildegard is not content with spiritual writing and music alone. She is a polymath, a thinker who sees no boundary between body and soul, between heaven and earth. She writes treatises on medicine and natural science. Physica and Causae Curae describe plants, stones, animals, and the human body in ways both empirical and metaphysical. She prescribes treatments, herbs, and tonics, and suggests that health lies in balance, of humors, of sin, of spiritual clarity. Her worldview is holistic before the word existed. To heal the body, one must heal the soul. To understand the cosmos, one must listen to the earth. And people do listen. She corresponds with emperors, popes, abbots, and other mystics. She writes stern letters to bishops who stray from the Church's teachings. To Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor, she writes with firm warning. To abbots who doubt her, she replies with calm certainty. Her visions are not her own, they are God's. And yet, her life is not without resistance. At one point late in her life, she permits a young nobleman who died excommunicated to be buried on convent grounds. This act defies ecclesiastical orders. In response, the Church places her convent under interdict, meaning no masses, no sacraments, no music. It is a grave punishment, especially for a community built around divine sound. But Hildegard does not recant. She argues eloquently that the man had confessed before death and deserved Christian burial. Eventually, the interdict is lifted. Her authority remains intact. She dies in 1179 at the age of 81, an exceptional age for her time. It is said that at the moment of her death, 2 arcs of brilliant light appeared in the sky above her convent. Her sisters described her face as glowing with peace. Centuries later, she would be canonized and named a doctor of the Church, one of only a handful of women to receive the title. But even without sainthood, Hildegard's life remained singular. She was a nun, a visionary, a healer, a composer, a theologian, a woman who lived within the rigid walls of monasticism, yet stretched beyond them into the cosmos. Her words, her music, her visions, each offered a glimpse of something greater, stranger and more beautiful than her time allowed. And though she lived in silence, behind stone walls, her voice still sings. Now, from the certainty of Hildegard's heavenly visions, we step into the fog of something far more uncertain, a lost gospel, a heretical manuscript, and the whisper of betrayal. Settle in now as the world turns darker, more secretive. We leave the illuminated manuscripts of Hildegard's convent and descend into the shadows of early Christian mystery, into the dust of ancient deserts, and the quiet, forbidden corners of belief. The Gospel of Judas, even the name stirs something uneasy. Judas the betrayer, the man whose name became synonymous with treachery, the disciple who, with a kiss, handed Jesus to his enemies and sealed his place in infamy. So when a document surfaced bearing his name, written in the language of early Christian mystics, it stirred more than controversy. It whispered of hidden truths, of stories untold, of history's delicate balance between orthodoxy and obliteration. But to understand this gospel, we must first understand its world. It is the 2nd century CE. The Roman Empire is vast, glittering, and brutal. Christianity is still young, not yet an institution, not yet a fixed set of beliefs. The followers of Jesus are scattered, often persecuted, and deeply divided. There are no Bibles yet, no councils, no dogma, just letters, visions, testimonies. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of gospels circulate. The Gospel of Mary, of Thomas, of Philip, of truth. Among these, some teach familiar stories. Others offer strange new ones, of secret teachings, cosmic hierarchies, heavenly eons, and divine sparks trapped in human flesh. These are the Gnostics. Their name comes from the Greek, ensis, meaning knowledge. But not knowledge in the ordinary sense. They sought a deeper knowing, a hidden truth buried beneath the surface of Scripture, of flesh, of the created world. To Gnostics, the material world was not the final reality. It was flawed, perhaps even evil, created by a lesser God, an ignorant one. Salvation lay not through obedience, but through awakening, through insight. It is in this milieu that the Gospel of Judas was likely written, not by Judas himself, but by an unknown Gnostic writer perhaps in Egypt. Sometime before the year 180 CE, its existence was known only through one line in a furious denunciation by Irenaeus of Lyon, a church father. He dismissed it as heresy, dangerous, false, corrupt. And then, for nearly 2,000 years, it vanished, till quite by accident it resurfaced. In the 1970s, in a desert cave near Elminia, Egypt, a farmer uncovered a leather-bound codex among a bundle of papyri. The find was remarkable, but the pages were fragile. The scroll passed hand to hand, hidden away, even kept in a bank vault, began to decay. It wasn't until the early 2000s that scholars painstakingly restored, translated, and revealed the contents to the world. What they found was astonishing. The Gospel presents a very different view of Judas Iscariot. In it, Jesus laughs not out of cruelty, but with calm detachment as the other disciples misunderstand his teachings. Only Judas, it says, truly understands him. And Jesus tells Judas not that he will betray him, but that he will sacrifice the man who clothes me. It is a mysterious phrase. To Gnostic ears, it suggests something profound. Judas did not betray Jesus out of greed or weakness, but at Jesus' own request, that he alone understood the divine plan, that his act, his infamous act, was not treachery, but revelation. In this gospel, Jesus speaks not of earthly kingdoms, but of invisible realms of cosmic orders, stars, and angels. He teaches in riddles, in metaphors. He calls the other disciples, offering sacrifices to their God, implying that they worship the wrong creator. It is not a gentle gospel. It is strange, alien, haunting, and yet for some early Christians, it offered comfort. In a world where suffering was constant, the idea that the material world was not the ultimate reality was freeing. Where others saw condemnation, Gnostics saw liberation. They sought the divine spark within and viewed martyrdom, even death, as passage rather than punishment. But the Church, as it began to formalize doctrine, had no room for ambiguity, no space for multiple gospels or radically different theologies. The Gospel of Judas, along with many others, was buried literally and figuratively. It would take 1,800 years for its pages to return to light. By then, its meaning was layered, contested, and quietly powerful. Was Judas a villain or a vessel? Was this gospel a revelation or a rebellion? Perhaps we'll never know for certain. But what remains is a whisper, preserved through time, ink on papyrus, of a story that once dared to question everything. And now, gently, we rise from mystery back into the world of privilege. While ordinary nuns labored in silence, another class of religious men dined, ruled, and reveled behind cloistered walls. And now, gently, we emerge from the shadowed parchments of forgotten scripture and step into a different world altogether. One still cloistered, still wrapped in ritual and silence, yet humming quietly with wealth, indulgence, and power. The world of abbots. If the common nun lived in drafty cells, her days ruled by obedience and toil, the abbot's life was often something else entirely. Not for every abbot. Certainly not all were rich or powerful, but many, far more than you might think, lived in a manner not unlike the secular nobility of their time. Let us begin in the heart of a monastic complex. Imagine thick stone walls enclosing a quiet order. The air smells of herbs from the cloister garden, damp stone corridors, and the distant smoke of incense curling upward in the chapel. Yet beyond the modest chapel pews and the cold stone refectories lies a different kind of space, the abbotess quarters. Here, the walls are draped in imported textiles. A fire glows in the hearth, tended not by the abbot himself, but by servants. Yes, servants assigned to his comfort. The bed is not straw but feather-stuffed. The floors may be tiled. The writing desk, likely Italian, carved holds correspondence not only with bishops and other abbots, but with kings, merchants, and nobles. The abbot, after all, was no mere monk. He was often a landlord, a political player, and a man of great influence. Across Europe in the High Middle Ages, monastic lands grew vast. Abbeys were granted thousands of acres by grateful rulers, eager to store up favor with heaven. Someone had to manage it, all the herds of sheep, the grain harvests, the rents paid by peasants, the disputes among tenants, and the legal obligations to the crown. That someone was the abbot. By the 12th and 13th centuries, abbots in certain orders were elevated to the status of mitred abbots, men who were technically equal to bishops, their own croziers and ceremonial authority. Some even sat in parliaments. And with power came wealth. It was, after all, not only peasants who gave generously to abbeys. Nobles and kings made frequent donations land, relics, silver for the salvation of their souls. These gifts filled monastery treasuries with resources, and while the rule of Saint Benedict urged modesty, temperance, and humility, enforcement was another matter. Feasting, for instance, became common in certain monastic communities, particularly in France and England. While the monks might eat simple porridge or cabbage stew in the refectory, the abbot might dine more lavishly in his private quarters. Roasted game, wine from his own vineyards, spices from distant lands, a whole roasted pig on a feast day, perhaps. All within the walls of a place supposedly devoted to asceticism. The abbot's table might even host visiting nobles, high-ranking clergy, or diplomats. Discussions over duck and pear compote might range from local land disputes to questions of succession and papal loyalty. Some abbots commissioned fine art altarpieces, tapestries, and illuminated manuscripts, not just for worship, but to display their abbey's glory and their own discernment. And then there was travel. While ordinary monks might never leave their abbey walls for decades, abbots traveled to Rome, to royal courts, to synods and councils. They rode with retinues, stayed in fine guest houses, and negotiated matters of church and state. This might sound almost regal, and in many ways it was. The abbot's life was not without strain. Power invited scrutiny. Monks sometimes revolted against corrupt or indulgent abbots. There are records of abbots being ousted for excessive drinking, for keeping falcons, or even quietly for maintaining romantic liaisons. Though such things were usually covered with layers of euphemism in official documents, some abbots grew fearful of worldly influence. They felt the weight of their own comfort and struggled with guilt. Others rationalized their lifestyles as necessary for the management of their domains, for the glory of God, or simply because they could. Let us pause here and reflect gently. On one side of the monastery, a young lay sister might be sweeping the cloister with frozen fingers, whispering prayers under her breath. On the other side, the abbot may be sipping a sweetened cordial, penning a letter to a bishop, surrounded by velvet hangings, same stone walls, very different lives. This contrast was not unique to monasteries. Throughout history, religion and wealth have danced an uneasy waltz, sometimes as partners, sometimes as rivals. And so the story of the medieval monastery is not just one of prayer and silence, but of hierarchy and complexity of souls, both humble and exalted, living very different versions of devotion. And now, as the candlelight fades and the stone cloisters fall silent once more, we step quietly back from the past and into the calm of the present. You've traveled tonight through thick monastery walls, felt the cold stone underfoot, and heard the soft rustle of habits in long corridors. You've knelt beside the weary nun in prayer, watched visions flicker behind Hildegard's closed eyes, unrolled fragile scrolls of forgotten gospels, and wandered quietly through the velvet-draped chambers of powerful abbots. History, when whispered, becomes something else entirely. It is no longer about dates and names, but about sensations, about rhythms, about the quiet beat of ordinary lives caught between faith and flesh, obedience and rebellion, silence and song. The world of the medieval cloister was many things. It was confining, yes, but it was also sacred. It was filled with hardship, yet not without beauty. And for all its rules, its rituals, and its rigid structure, it contained people, complex, yearning people, just like you. Perhaps that's the most lasting truth of all, that behind the veils and vows, the parchments and prayers, history is never just a list of events, but a record of longing for meaning, for safety, for the divine, for peace. And now, as your own room stills and the hum of modern life grows quiet, let your thoughts drift. You are not in a cell of stone or bound to bells that ring through the dark. You are safe, you are warm, you are free. Let the echoes of cloisters fade behind you. Let the sound of ink scratching on parchment grow dim. Let the rustle of robes and the toll of distant church bells become softer and softer, until they melt into the silence of sleep. Tomorrow will come, but for now, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the past keep watch while you rest. Good night.